please?
Robert Harley Nicol,
Can you give your date of birth?
25th of August, 1934.
And are you aware that you're being recorded?
I'm sorry?
Are you aware that this is being recorded?
Yes, I am.
Can you tell us where were you born?
Hamilton, Montana.
And what was your family doing here when you were born?
My father was working in the fuel business here in Hamilton, and my mother was a housewife and later worked in the courthouse.
Did you live in town?
We lived both in town and out where my grandfather built a house south of Hamilton, about a mile. We changed back and forth. My father built the house in 1940, and we stayed in it until he went into the Navy, and we stayed there until he got out of the Navy in 1946. And then we basically moved out to the grandparents' old home and back one time, and then I was raised basically at the place south of Hamilton.
Where'd you go to grade school?
Hamilton, Montana.
Which school in Hamilton?
Just the regular, I went to the Jefferson grade school and regular high school.
So you graduated of Hamilton High School?
Yes, 1952.
And how long had your family been in the valley?
They immigrated here arrived here in 1864.
From where did they come?
Well, they originated all together of them. The Elliott and the Nicol families started from Waverly, Iowa, and they went slowly northward with their wagon and oxen. They ended up spending the winter near, I think it's Fort Bridger, Wyoming, and then the next year they went into the gold rush stuff over by Virginia City. And I'm not real clear of the dates on that, but then they arrived in the Bitterroot in, I think it was in December, early December, 1864.
Did they own property here?
They homesteaded.
Whereabouts?
They homesteaded a large area between the several family members south of Hamilton, almost all the way to Scout Cove Creek, from the river to where the railroad tracks now lie. And
then they made their living as ranchers or farmers?
No, they were basically, he's listed in the archives as a freighter. And what they did, most of the income was to haul produce from the Bitterroot here over to the mines near Butte and Anaconda.
What was the route they would take to do that?
What was that, sir?
What was the route?
They would go down towards Missoula. They crossed the river, I think, twice getting down there, and then, or more, and then they go up the Blackfoot River up through Drummond and Deer Lodge into the Butte area.
Okay. So you graduated from Hamilton High School what year?
1952.
1952. And when did you first get interested in the outdoors?
My first what, sir?
When did you first get interested in being outdoors?
Oh, I was hunting with my grandfather and my dad and my uncle ever since I was big enough to carry a .22. And then my first real job with the Forest Service was when I was a junior in high school. They wanted volunteer firefighters, and you had to be 18. I was only 16, but when I walked in the room with a friend of mine, they said, "There's two 18-year-olders," and so they sent us out on what turned out to be a jumper fire. We helped carry the gear out.
Where was that at?
It was up the West Fork someplace. I don't recall the exact name of the fire.
So were you on the fire first when the jumpers got there?
The jumpers were there first. I remember one of the two jumpers' names was Hinault, and they're from Darby, and my father knew them pretty well.
He knew the family?
He knew the family, yes.
Yeah. Well, I heard tell there were a lot of smoke jumpers from the Bitterroot.
Yeah. That was kind of the old saying it went. If you worked on a farm in a Bitterroot, you just about had a job, unless they had something against it. And particularly if you were athletic in high school. And things like that. And so I got into jumpers when I was 17, in the summer of '52 was my first year.
Were you involved in high school athletics?
Oh, yeah.
What did you do in high school?
Football, basketball, and track.
So, the summer of 1952, and do you remember anything about your new man training?
Yeah, they didn't have, one thing they come up with all the time, they didn't have what they call the PT test, which is a timed run and stuff like that, and number of chin-ups and number of push-ups. They just put you on the units, the regular units, and they had an obstacle course that you had to get through at a certain time. And this all took place at 9 Mile. And it was 9 Mile where I first started the training, because there was no jumper base in Missoula itself at that time.
And then where did you jump out of?
Missoula.
And so how many years did you jump?
8.
8 years, so through 1960.
No, I spent 2 years in the Marine Corps, starting in fall of '54, and I got out in the spring of '56 and went back jumping.
What'd you do in the Marine Corps?
I started off as just an infantryman, and then I got assigned to what they call an air naval gunfire liaison unit, and I met the commander of that particular section, who was a pilot, and we started talking about our backgrounds, and he says, "Well, heck, you've got a unit in the Marine Corps that drops cargo, and you'd fit right in on that." And so I said, "Thank you," and then he left and went wherever he went. Then I got a letter of transfer from the 3rd Marine Division, which was based in Japan at that time, to the 1st Marine Air Wing, which was supposed to be based in Korea at that time. And that was in the fall of '54. And they sent me off to Korea, and I got there and gave them my papers, and they says the 1st Marine Air Wing had been transferred to Japan, to Iwakuni, Japan. So I hung around there for a month or so, and they finally transferred me back to Iwakuni, Japan. And that's where I served up my time. I came back to the States in, it was in in November '55.
What kind of planes were you taking cargo, dropping cargo from in the Marines?
C-119.
C-119s. So when you got back, what'd you do in the winter months when you weren't jumping?
Well, I came back to the Beirut. They let me out that spring, and I looked all over trying to get a job in a sawmill or something like that. And I finally had to be a bartender until the fire training season started. I went back to Missoula and training in probably May or something like that. And,
Now, what were the fire seasons like generally those last, I guess that'd be 6 more years?
yeah, they were good. I was on the Silver City detail for 6 years, and that was very interesting. That usually took place started in May and got back in July, and that was usually very active. The last year before I went down there, '53, I wasn't on the Silver City detail, but I think I made 18 fire jumps that year, and it was a very busy season.
Yeah. Did they move you around like up to Alaska, or just everything out of Missoula?
They would detail us down, but usually on basically a fire order, because they were Reading, for instance, or McCall, or what they had Idaho City going at that time.
What were the aircraft?
DC-3s for the most part. We had, when I was jumping, they had Travel Airs, Fords, Twin Beaches came in after I started jumping, and then DC-3s while I was in there.
Do you remember any fires that stand out that were pretty memorable?
Oh,
Or fire jumps?
you know, I made almost 100 fire jumps, and I remember a lot of them and everything else, but I can't think of anything that particularly stands out.
Well, with that many jumps, did you move up to be squad leader? And,
I made squad leader in '56, fall '56, And I made foreman in 1960.
So you were at the jump base in Missoula when the call came in for the earthquake.
That's correct.
So why don't you tell us what happened that day?
Well, it was,
What year was that?
that was in 1959, and it was quite a busy fire season, as I recall. And I got a call about 4 o'clock in the morning, just telling me to get out to the base. And so I went out there, and I thought, to start with, that it was just a fire call. I knew there was pretty short jumpers, but it turned out to be they were getting ready for a rescue. And it was a lot of rumors going on. I mean, we didn't really know what was going on at the time. And so we took off in the DC-2 with 10 jumpers, 2 spotters, and 2 pilots. And we went over toward West Yellowstone, and when we turned up that Hebgen, I guess it's where Hebgen Lake is, the canyon up there, by that time we'd heard there was an earthquake, and just radio traffic that the pilots would relay back to us. And it looked like we started up that canyon, and it was kind of rainy and low ceiling and everything else. It looked like somebody just cut a mountain in half, and it had slid down into the river. And it was all going, wow, wow, what all this about? So, yeah, that's what it looked like when we first got there. And we flew down the canyon a couple times, and we could see that the major part of the slide had blocked the river, and the river was coming up very rapidly. We knew there was a lot of campgrounds in that area, and that the water was coming up over the road at that time. The road was much lower towards the lake than it is now. And we basically decided to drop on the 2 biggest, largest groups we could see, one of them being on the, right where the dam was itself. I think it was on the east side of the dam.
Which, of Hebgen Lake Dam?
Yeah, Hebgen Lake Dam.
Yeah.
On the east side of the dam, and the other 4 would jump down at another group of people that were probably 3 or 4 miles down the river from there. So we split it into two crews basically. The foreman was Al Hammond, and he jumped with the first 4 at the dam. Al Hammond and Dick Tracy, the squad leader, and then Roland Anderson and I and 2 others went down, and they dropped us on the lower spot was selected.
What'd you find when you got there?
Well,
What were the spots like? Was there